Hi, everybody. My name is Tony. I'm the founder of MetaOpAI, and I'm here to talk about MetaOpAI. Let's run it. So, pretty much, MetaOpAI is basically a signal intelligence app. We ingest journal entries and extract signals. We store those signals, and we then are able to pull those signals at need and build your prompts and then send those prompts to the LLM. We're a bit different than most other AI companies. Most companies are just following what the general purpose AI companies do, which is basically have your entire conversation in a session, and that conversation or session will eventually implode just out of the weight of it because all that context over a period of time gets forwarded and compresses and folds over and over and over again and sent to the LLM every single iteration. And in that process, what happens is it increases your noise to signal ratio. That's when you start noticing the conversation with the AI. Well, it doesn't matter the model, it starts deteriorating mid session because the context has expanded to the point of the LM not being able to process. And this is fundamentally a problem. And you know, in addition to that, it leads to high token costs if you're an AI company just using a model and just using an API to connect to a model. It also, in addition to that, it causes you know a regurgitation effect where the user is going to narrate X, the AI will respond with Y, and when the user responds to that, what the AI does is it starts creating a summary of the initial response, which was X, the AI's initial response, which was Y, and then the user's recent response, and then it sends it to the LLM, summarizes all of those, responds with that summary version, and then appends its response to the end of it. So now that entire process is going to be over and over again. And if you notice that pattern, really what's happening is it's taking all the data on the field, compressing it, and then responding it. And in this process, it's folding that over and over and over again. And that's where you start having a high noise to signal ratio. The conversation feels, distance, and you're not really having a thorough conversation. And that's where the session kind of reaches limits. And then you have to create a new session and start all over again. MetaOpAI's entire existence, the whole purpose of why I built this, if you actually read the 97-page white paper I wrote, sorry about that, no, about this particular issue, was the very reason why I built this app. It was mainly out of frustration back in December of 2025, and took me 2 months to kind of put everything together. Started vibe coding. This entire app is vibe coded, by the way. The end of February of 2026. It's now May 24th as of this video. Yeah, May 24th. And excuse me. And this entire process has been, just me solo dev, just vibe coding it out. Now, fortunately for me, I have some experience in this field, so it's kind of like having home field advantage. Just kind of play the position, and I was able to work with multiple AI. I use Claude, I use Grok, I use ChatGPT. I use DeepSeek. It was like a team effort, which is AI. It's like so it was pretty cool to kind of see a vision turn into reality, and I'm very humbled to have the opportunity to even do so. So so let's walk through how it looks and how it works. As you can see on my page right here, I'm on the space homepage, and really the idea, before I run through that, let me actually take a look at this and just cover the token cost stuff that I was mentioning about. I created this graphic. This comes right from my white paper. You can see that in this graphic here, it's a lot of activity going on, but it's important to understand the two graphs right here. You'll see that with MetaOpAI, as a user narrates something, we actually extract we have like 4 or 5 parallel extractions that are happening in real time, and this actually extracts the contents that we need for our KRL, which is what we developed. This is basically going to be the storage that's going to store these 5 important things that we need consistently for our journal for the different dimensions. So the dimensions are the user journal, the user, the people you're talking about. We call them entities, and then the environment in which this thing happened, these circumstances happen or events happen. We call those spaces, and also the relationships themselves. So these are the 4 dimensions, and then there's multiple different properties of those dimensions, and about 5. And these are what these extractors are actually pulling out. You read the white paper; it's very extensive, and you'll kind of see the how that works. But what's important is to see that even though we're making multiple LLMs calls, what's happening here is it's consistent on the basis. It's somewhat, but it's somewhat extensive, but it's consistent. Whereas on the opposing side, because the session with AI wrappers and chats, what happens is because the session is always being folded over, and it's always folded over, always expanded, you're going to have a gradual incline. And this is like it's moving quadratically, right? Expanding. And the problem why this is happening is because you're constantly having your session, your entire context folded over and sent over to the LM. The LM summarizes everything and then appends its response to it, and that process goes over and over again, and it dilutes the user out of the conversation. And this is terrible because, as I mentioned multiple times, it's high noise to signal ratio, and what a lot of people don't realize is it's actually more tokens. So if you are in the financial space and you're investing in these AI projects, be mindful of the AI overhead. You think that like we could kind of control it with prompt engineering, not necessarily, because it's the entire context that's being folded over, because there's no persistent storage. There is no, that's fundamentally the problem. And that's why the space is talking about context engineering, and it's really becoming a much more important conversation, I think, and a much needed conversation, to be fair, because that taps into energy consumptions and things like that. So this is pretty cool. The really good graphic here. I'm just gonna go ahead and close that one out, and I do want another graphic to show you here. This is kind of how the MetaOpAI approach. So how it really works is you narrate, user write or speaks freely. We don't have text to voice yet, voice to text yet, but it will come as a feature. The other one is extract. So it's going to start extracting signals and events and meta context and context. Do you remember I mentioned earlier about the dimensions and I said properties? Well, these are the properties that we're extracting the 5 LM calls that we're doing. And these are basically your signals, your events, your meta contexts, and your context. And these are the stuff that we need to kind of create a pattern. And these things here are stored in the KRL. And the KRL is basically a queryable. It's not a blob. It's a structured storage. We have four scopes, as I mentioned. The 4 scopes are the user, the actual subject or the entities, and then the space, and then the relationship. So those are the 4 dimensions. And then the properties of those dimensions, as I mentioned here, are signals, events, meta context, and context. And then there's patterns. These are with time, it's going to give us a nice pattern. So those are the 5 properties. And then what we do is that we recognize the pattern engine fires on signal aggregates. And what we do, the problem is when we have signal intelligence, there's a problem. Too much patterns or too much signals extracted. We think that they're important to have all these signals, and we're just constantly in the business of extracting signals and storing signals. Well, the problem is we just created more noise because now we overpopulate with signals and we have too much patterns, right? So we need some type of ability to kind of age them out. And, most developers will tell you like, FIFO, LIFO, all that stuff. And I kind of stole an idea from DNS. Every time I get lost, I just look at DNS. Because I think it's just brilliant in every sense of the way. And DNS has a DNS cache, TTL, time to live. And I thought that was relatively brilliant. That like, hey, if we're not seeing the same signal and it doesn't go through the same process, therefore that pattern that was birthed from that signal and we're not seeing that anymore, well, that pattern should be deprecated. If we don't see the signal, the pattern should deprecate out and the TTL should expire. So the idea is the signal refreshes the pattern. So that kind of idea. And there's a confidence score across all these different signal things that are extracted in the KRL. And then one of the cool things is there's a contradiction awareness as well. So one of the things is context. Context is a factual thing. It is something that we know for sure that in a sea of user narrations, everything is biased, but we have to pull out one or two gems that are the facts. And those things I called context. So if somebody says, hey, I'm a security engineer, that would be context. The problem, however, is if they say, hey, I'm a security engineer on Monday, and then Tuesday they go to journal and they say, I'm a firefighter. Well, how do you rectify that? Most AIs are just going to replace it, right? We came up with a more different solution. We call it contradiction awareness. When we know there's a value already stored and the extraction pulls out something and these two do not match what's just been extracted for that area that's already been occupied by another resource, different hash. What happens is we have to correct that. And how do we correct that? We basically have something where we prompt to the user and inquire, are you sure that this happened? And we just get clarification from the user. Now, if the user agrees to it, it will replace it. If the user ignores it or says no, it just washes it away, and we retain what we already had in the KRL. So that's the idea behind the contradiction awareness, kind of preserve the integrity of what the data that we have in there. Keep in mind, it's a journal. There's going to be bias. We can't control that, but these are the things that we're coming up with and experimenting with, and just trying to get a grasp of this field, because for us, it's relatively new, and for me at least, it's relatively new, and I'm just trying to learn in a lot of ways, and building something that you kind of are frustrated out because it doesn't exist is the best way to learn, and hopefully you build something really cool, in a lot of ways, right? So that's pretty much what the recognize aspect is, and as I covered here just a few moments ago. Then there's the trace and clean. Every turn writes a trace and what was retrieved and why. So now we're getting all that data, that telemetry, and all that stuff compounds. And then there's the response. The LLM is a stateless commodity here, and it's just going to basically process that data and be the reasoning model right there. And because the way this is designed, we can swap out the LLM. Today we're using OpenAI. We may want to use Claude. There's no specific dependencies to it. And then obviously it goes through a compose. I'm going to show you guys that in a minute. What the compose does, the small structured prompt with citations and guardrails. And we're doing our prompt engineering there. We're going to frame it and get things addressed how we need it. And then there's the retrieve. This is the most important part. It's like, I actually went the other way around. Sorry about that. Nervous. But yeah, the retrieve is number 5. So it's only what is relevant in scope. And the window stays small and signals stay high. And this is basically going to retrieve the contents from the KRL if the inquiry is about that. And then we go to compose, then we respond to the LM, and then trace and learn. So I'm going to show you what the compose is. And as you can see down here, we have small windows, only relevant context enters the model because we're getting the context from the KRL. And then we have a persistent cognition because of our KRL. That means we have better answers. We're not going to have high noise. We're very small context window because we're storing our context. We know what we're doing. And we have nice signals, more signals with that. And as you can see here, the impact is lower cost, lower latency, higher quality, and better to scale. And yeah, I believe that firmly. So let me go and show you what the context looks like. And this is what the context architecture looks like here. And sorry for going front and back. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning right now. Should not be doing this. But what the composer sends to the LLM. And as you can see here, it sends the user prompts. As I mentioned, like, hey, I feel like my brother has been distant lately, all that jazz. And then you see down here, it says the KRL continuity retrieval. So it's going to go ahead and pull all the signals and events and context and meta context pertaining to that prompt. And when it comes down here, we have a session cache, which is pretty cool. So we do have a cache. It does store it for the day and it wipes it out. But this is just it's lower priority than the KRL. The KRL is the primary, it is the priority, and we weight it. So the session cache is weighted lower, and it's used as reference or subcontext to it. So think of these are all the factors that are being used to basically populate the prompt or enrich the prompt from the historical retrieval from the KRL. But then if we need sub context, we'll pull it from the session cache. And then there's the external RAG. So this goes outbound and pull any type of like content that are being used. So something like relatively to news, could be something like, hey, you know, the user's narrating something about the train not working or something. It's able to go out there and pull that content if it needs be. But the whole idea behind this comes down to if a user works in a particular space, like let's say they're a nurse, she's a nurse or he's a nurse, and they're basically using jargon or medical jargon or legal jargon, whatever it is, and that jargon is being conflated by the LLM. So the idea is that that's going to pull out enrichment. So we're going to enrich that data so we know exactly what that user is talking about, without the user have to re-explain themselves. And you know that gets sent over to the LLM as well. And then obviously our policy and guardrails, and then any orchestration directives that we'll send over. And we have like a whole cognition engine and things like that we're going to basically pass it through. And all these things are kind of like the instructions that we get passed over to the LLM. So granted, we are sending more prompts, like we're sending more to the like not more, but we're sending increasing the frequency, but what we're sending is very precise. So it's like the idea behind this is like, think about ChatGPT or any wrapper. Yeah, they're sending one thing to the LLM, but that one thing is massive. It is the entire session. Your first initial conversations are very short, precise, so it's in your favor. But over a period of time, every time that conversation is folded over and over and over again and then passed into the LLM, or in this case is consistent with what we're sending. We're sending maybe like 5, 6, 7, or 8 times per prompt, but they're very precise and small, and that gives it that linear trajectory that I showed you earlier. So that's pretty much the idea behind what we're doing here. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. So this is the app, MetaOpAI, and basically what I'm in here right now is the space homes, and the idea of space is like your environment. It encapsulates different areas of your environment. So like work, friend, if a friend group, there's some drama in the friend group, maybe there's a class group that you're in school, or maybe there's a faith group that you have and you're doing like a lot of extra activities at church or temple, or maybe you're in a family group. You could have multiple family groups, your mother's side, your father's side, your cousins, what may have you. And the idea is to create these environments because your environment influences everybody. You're a different person when you're at work, you're a completely different person when you're at home, and your environment has a factor in who you are and what you are. So there's context at the environment level that we want to encapsulate and capture. So let's go into work, and I'll check, go in here and check this out. You can see in work, these are the AI, the RAG is pulling some content here, and notice that security engineer is popping up, and it's just pulling all that jazz in here. It tells you that one of the patterns it caught, and urgency is telling you this is a very frequent pattern up here. It shows you your graph, if things are trending down or up in the space. And then you could think about these spaces here. You want to go back to this. The best analogy I can give is like each one of these spaces are like notebooks for different subjects when you're in school. One for math, English, science, all that jazz. And you click on one of them and you look at the tools. There's all these analytic tools. These are the tools that's pertaining to the journal. You could think of it like, or to the notebook. You could think of it like if you bought those composition notebooks when you were younger and you flip to the back, there's some analytic tools like a protractor, a geographic map, maybe some conversions to metric system or what may have you. That's what these are. These are the analytic tools on the down here, and these are used to like just do analytics with the data that you've journalized here. So I'm gonna click on this. You can see that the conversation I'm already having here. Hey, Mike was rude to Frank. I'm gonna come over here, just drop in here today. I'm gonna actually clear this up. I'm gonna click commit to timeline. See, just erased everything. And I'm gonna show you guys something really cool. You'll see over here that these are all the journal entries that I made in the past. In this space is one I use for QA. And you notice that if I keep revisiting and I keep going to the same entry over and over again, it actually will append this link here, and it'll just tell you, you revisited this entry 3 times in the last week. Something about this entry you reflected on growing distance in relationship, keep pulling you back, and it just asks you questions about it because I keep going back to it. And the idea is that your journal entries get summarized when you click commit, and it adds the date to it of when you click commit, and it's a summarized version. And if you expand it, you can see the actual conversation. You can even resume where you left off at. It's just going to change the date, so you can see a lot of conversations were happening during the QA process. And because it's QA, this one doesn't have it because I didn't click on it quite frequently. And you can see all the conversations during QA, how it was going between the AI and myself. Pretty cool. And one of the coolest features I like about this is there's a correlation up here. And the idea is kind of like, I'll give you a real life scenario. Say you're in a group chat 6 months ago with a bunch of friends, and one of your friends are getting married, and she got an engagement ring, and somebody made a comment about it, and she felt a certain kind of way. A month later, you guys are all hanging out together, and she's a bit distant from you. Maybe perhaps with the comment, I don't know. And then let's say another month later or 2 months later, you found out that you're being uninvited to the wedding, her wedding. And that scenario sounds crazy, but in actuality, it's very common with a lot of different friends group, believe it or not, because weddings are such a stressful time. But if you're journaling, you can actually come here and you can select multiple events at different chronological order, and you can throw it into the AI, and the AI is going to basically pull up. I picked one that had no summary, but it's going to basically pull up all the different content up here, and you can see that it's pulling dates and it's doing the correlation and looking for correlations across these different patterns. And you could ask questions like, negativity aggression of May 23rd. What patterns did you see? Did you observe? And then it's going to just go ahead and respond with even the content and the more patterns. And notice it's added more dates, it's pulling the events, because if it goes back to what I was saying before, it's pulling all that good content. It's doing the retrieval from the KRL because we're storing all that data. And that's the real benefit of it. And that's what most products can't do today, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to go ahead and click back out into space and just kind of scroll down here. And once again, I'm in the workspace. Notice that there's some users down here. So what you want to do is you could assign a user to the space. And when you assign that user, you're going to bring that user's context into the space, and now they become eligible. So think of a space like a lobby in Call of Duty, and these are the players that have been invited to the space, and you could uninvite them. It's like a lobby. You can just say, hey, Sean's no longer welcome in the space, and notice he's gone. And the reason why is because before you saw there was 4, now there's 3. And if you want to talk about people in journal about them in that context, you can write at, Mike, show, actually, let me go back here. Show me all the issues. Oh, I'm just like this. Sorry, I have so many different scenarios. At Mike was rude. Or not John. At Mike was rude at today's stand-up. I want to put all incorrect grammar, all that jazz to show you that it doesn't matter. Cool. And then you see that it just says perfect. So notice that it kind of narrates that, takes a date of today's date, the 24th of May, and basically says there's multiple instances of rudeness, disrespect during stand-up, which aligns with repair. And it's just putting patterns out there, pulling patterns out and saying, hey, there's a high confidence of this. And notice a signal was extracted from that conversation. And that's really, really super informative. And you could follow up and have multiple conversations and be as prescriptive as you like about those scenarios. And I showed you the whole commit to timeline jazz, but I'm going to also show you some other tools here. Analyst is pretty cool. It just gives you more analysts about it. You could work through those patterns. But I'm going to go back out, and I want to go into journal again here. And I want to click on signal. What signal is when you see 2 different people are having a conversation. It could be nonverbal communications or what may have you. You're not part of that discussion, so you're just observing like a reporter. And you could write like, I saw, at Mike. I'm gonna pick on Mike again. Was rude to at Frank. Also at today's stand up. Now you don't have to do that here. You could do it in the journal page, if you want to. But this is if you want to have signals, or you want to see conversations and mature those conversations where it does not involve you at all. You are not in a position. You're in observer mode. You can see up here. This is what I want to show you, and you're not going to be extracted. You're in a witnessing state. And that's pretty cool, because now there's enrichment happening between these two, and you could have a more constructive conversation about other people's interactions with the AI, observing and correlating on the back end. I'm going to go back out, and I'm going to click on Mera. Mera is just like the AI asks you questions based on what the AI wants to know about you, just so it could build those baselines and just mature the enrichment down here. This is really good stuff. And I just want to show the other stuff here. 360 is pretty cool, because what 360 does is a little bit adverse. So there's a warning in the beginning. I just clicked right through it, but it just gives you a heads up to let you know that, look, what if you are the problem type of stuff, right? So I'm gonna just give an example what I mean by that. Would you be able to assess at Mike and I issues and issues and perspective, right? And it's just gonna give me an adversarial read. Just let me know what the patterns is seeing, and then what positive is going to show you, because every adversarial read it gives you a positive with it. So it complements it. So it's not all bad, and it just gives you a different perspective about it, right? About both you and Mike and yourself, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on out. You can follow up on that if you want to, and just engage in that conversation. Outcomes is my favorite, because if you have to write an email to Mike, or you want to, here's the thing about outcome, because we are modeling users based on users' narrations, and we have the ability, because we're doing this, as I mentioned before, we're having the KRL, which is the ability to store these concepts or these properties of these dimensions. And because we can do that, we can model these entities' behavior and profile them, so to speak, based on the user narrations, which is super important. So it all stems from the user's journal entries, right? And the cool part about this is that you can create fake scenarios that hasn't happened and use these people like in the model inside of it to kind of get predictive outcome, which is pretty cool. So I can give a hypothetical circumstance right here and be like, hey, at Mike, I I have to write an email to at Mike, and about patching his servers. I'm thinking about being direct, and given our history, what are the how would he react? And we're gonna see the outcome of this. Pretty cool. So it's kind of like game theory in a lot of ways. It's gonna look at all possible outcomes, but we will reduce it to 3. And it basically tells you like, hey, look, this is a reoccurring pattern, right? The AI has been mentioned this one pattern about this one person because it's consistent, and it's going to be able to talk through it, like how he would react given Mike's history of Mike and that pattern. It's likely that Mike will acknowledge your direct email, but may not take immediate action on patching the server. And notice that 60%, and notice that this is 30%, which is worth preparing for. Another plausible scenario is Mike responses defensive to your directness, and it just goes through the percentage breakdown, and you could ask questions like, why do you think the most likely will happen? What is 60%? And you notice that excuse me, it did not repeat that. It did not like give you a whole breakdown of it, right? I was less direct and polite when asking Mike. Let's see. And look at this. This is pretty cool. So you're able to follow up, have conversations, and then midstream, you're able to pivot and adjust without having to recycle or do anything else. And notice that it's able to, with more polite, direct tone, 50%, like he's less likely to do it, which is kind of funny. And notice up here, I'm getting a token limit, right? 97%. So I'm going to have to purchase more tokens, but I'll show you guys that in a minute. I've been QAing on this for a bit. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and click on the all entities pane to show you the entities. These are the people you create. They're global, so you could do global entities. If you click on it, you can see that they're rising. You can see that their status. I'm going to go out to Mike and show you a little bit more because he's the most enriched one. Obviously, he's declining. And you can see all the detected patterns we saw. And basically, we can click on entity analysis, which is basically if you want to have a journal entry with just about Mike and doesn't involve anybody else, but just want to talk without the environment. We'll go back out. And then let's go ahead and purchase some tokens. So I'm going to go ahead and click on settings. And I'm going to click on, I'll click on data privacy real quick just to show you guys. One of the cool things is you can actually download your data. So if I click download all 3 files, it's going to download. See, that's the MetaOpAI export. I'm going to go down here and then basically turn off the analytics. So if you want, you could turn off analytics. I'll cover that in a little bit. But before I do, and then also this shows you that you accepted the terms of service in the beginning. If you want to delete all your data, you could turn that off. Go back to settings. You could change the color too. So I'm probably going to change the color to terminal, which I like. Terminal's a really better color in my opinion, but actually I'll go back to light just in case people are watching the video. I'll cover that in a little bit. So yeah, this shows you all the signals from everywhere. So it shows you your signals, your patterns, your combined patterns, your recurrent patterns, your trends. It shows you who's the person that's narrating about, what spaces was that located in, and what date it was, and also the signal strength, like how verbose it was. So signals, patterns, combined patterns, recurrent patterns, and trends. It's pretty cool. Now let's go ahead and get some tokens. I'll cover the model, the costs shortly. And because I'm in a sandbox, I could put a fake credit card in, which is pretty cool. And you guys can see this in real time. 1 30 1 2 3 test and 11101 and pay. Cool. And these are, there you go. I just purchased that. I got 4 hours for that additional token. Every 6 a.m. at 6 a.m. the tokens local time will unlock and you get whatever your tier subscription is. You'll get your brand new refresher tokens. And if you're free, I offer 50k tokens, no cost. So at 6 a.m. if you consume all of them before 6 a.m. At 6 a.m. you get those tokens again. We just unlock another 50k for you so you can keep on journaling. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'm gonna go back into, notice the warning went away. I'm gonna get into this area here to show you the journal entries. I showed you all this, looks pretty good. On the Intel report, you can see all types of basically narration. Notice that the RAG is pulling some content in here. Shows you where this is. It shows you some patterns. Shows you the personality type. Excuse me. And some other really great context here. Great data. Help you win together, right? And then you want to click on this. And you could see pattern analysis, risk signals, recommended approach, relationship strategy. Really good intel here. And I'm going to go ahead, click back out. And then what we want to do is we want to click on Let's see, cross space. So one of the cool things about cross space, these are all spaces here, is the ability to run is a whiteboard, and its ability to import different parts of your life, and then friend group. And I'm just gonna write what patterns do you see between these two spaces? And you could add more. I'm just choosing an example. And then the AI basically do some narrations and just look at it and be like, oh, May 17th experienced an issue with Mike at work. And then also similarity with Sarah in your friend space, you notice a lack of resolution and follow through with communications on the 16th. Now let's go verify that, right? So work and friends. I click on work, and you notice Mike is assigned to work. That was one of the call outs. And then if I go into friends, and then Sarah is assigned to friends. And if I go back to the whiteboard, check this out, it's gone. Because what cross space really is a whiteboard for analytics. The ability to import different spaces and also different people, and then run queries and analytics against each other. That's pretty cool. And then this right here, as I mentioned before, it's just it's a notification board for all the signals, which is pretty cool. And you can search for them up here if you want to. If you want to look for signals, you can just type in signals. It's pretty cool. And if you click on settings, we'll go ahead and look at all the different settings we have. So we have the developer settings. This is really cool. So one thing I want to say, if you're vibe coding, you're building an app, what you want to do is build one of these, a diagnostic side, where you can see errors at the front end if you're making changes. And it's pretty cool because you can see that if there's any errors and you're not in the dev console, you can catch them right here, which is really cool, very helpful. One of the other things too, I'm only supported in federated auth. So I have a federated auth with the IDPs with Microsoft, Google, and Apple. So if you have one of those emails, you'd be able to use the app. So if we go back into settings, there's the about section, very straightforward. You can look at the private policy that you agree to, and so forth, which is very helpful. And then back into settings. I think I showed you guys these tokens and online. I'll cover this separately. We cover data privacy, which is super important, and looks pretty good here in personalization, which is like, you could get smaller, larger. If I want to go dark mode, this is dark mode, light mode, and then terminal, which is pretty cool. And then I'm going to go back up to profile, and this is the only bug that I still have in QA that it's not like a bug, but it just takes an awful long time. I think 3 seconds is a bit much, and I'm going to try to work on getting that refreshed down a little bit more over the weekend. But if you look here, this is my profile. You'll see that it basically has some basic information, some total entries, who I interacted with, what space, time invested, what space am I interacting with the most, what user I'm interacting with the most. And notice that you can see all the top spaces, top entities, and then also the type and rhythm. This is the behavioral analytics of MetaOpAI, where a user is able to type like say you're getting into a conversation with somebody and you're really angry, aggressive, the conversation's going crazy, so you start typing really fast. So it captures your word per second, and then there's their deviation from where your word per second is able to track that and look at your stress state fingerprint, which is pretty cool. And then your response latency, if you're stopping, you're pausing, you're taking a long time to think through something. It's looking at that as well. And then also sloppiness drift. If you're ever having a conversation with people, you start flipping out, whatever it is, or crashing out, you start noticing that your conversation, your spelling starts to get unhinged in a lot of ways. So we want to track that as a good indication. And then we also want to collect like your word choices that's coming up more frequently. And these two, there's some parity. Mike is being mentioned quite a lot, and if you look at the top entity by volume is Mike. So right there you can see that there's some validations happening. And then if you look at your actively heat map, like how frequent you communicate or how frequent you journal, and then you're just looking at all the different telemetry that it's collecting right now. That's the profile page. And then the growth journals in here where you could just narrate things just about you very introspectively. Nothing here is saved like in front of you, but the AI is learning off of that, and it goes into the KRL process here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back out. And then I'm just going to click on profile again. I'm going to click on user intel report. And you notice that that's the user intel report, right? Like those are the people that are signed. These are the patterns. Notice that the signals you can actually filter. You want to filter if you want 1, 2, like about your friend Nelson, maybe about your friend Mike, Alex, or what may have you. And then it shows you like your personality, like MBTI personality type. It shows like some traits and some EQ and cognitive style. It's really intuitive. There's a lot of intel here. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much that's MetaOpAI. It's once again it's a journal AI signal intelligence app. You can think of it as a journal meets a SIM, security information event manager tool. So you can think of it kind of in that context. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's some much more development that's going to happen in at the moment. But right now we're in the process of a beta. Private beta is about to be open. We're going to deploy this in Azure. And once it's deployed in Azure, we'll have the beta open. And from that point on, we're just going to start working towards getting things in the App Store and the Google Play Store. MetaOpAI recently just got accepted by Apple in the Apple Developer Program, which is pretty cool. And also the Google Play Store, we have a presence there as well. So we're going to be rolling out some apps in the upcoming months into those environments. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I really appreciate everybody's opportunity. I'm going to be like super polite. Thank you for walking through with 41 minutes of just me narrating and talking. And I really appreciate the opportunity and really hope you guys check out MetaOpAI. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.